He gave water to a dying Apache leader. The next day, the man's two beautiful warrior daughters arrived at his courthouse. They had not come to say thank you. They had come as payment for a debt he never asked to be owed, offering themselves as his wives. For a man who had buried his own family and sworn off the world, this was not an honor, it was a cage. How does a simple act of mercy lead to such an impossible choice? If you are curious what will happen next like me, comment 1 to get started. To understand how a solitary judge could find himself at the center of a storm of tradition and desire, we must go back to the beginning. Arizona Territory, late summer of 1882. Gray Ridge wasn't a real town so much as a collection of structures pretending to be one. A dozen buildings, a lopsided church, one saloon, and a courthouse that doubled as a jail and a gathering hall. The wind rolled in off the flats, dragging a fine, yellow dust through the empty main road, under doors, and across tired porches. Judge Isaac Thorne had lived on the edge of this town for 4 years. He didn't speak more than he had to, didn't drink, didn't gamble, and didn't tolerate noise. Not since the war. Not since losing his wife and young son to a fever in a mining camp near Santa Fe. He had buried them himself, had come to Gray Ridge, and had taken up the job of judge when no one else had wanted it. He was a man who had built a fortress of solitude around the hollow space where his heart used to be, a man who had accepted his fate. If you have ever felt like an outsider, a person caught between two worlds, belonging to neither, then you understand the quiet, desperate courage of Annaba. If you believe that true strength is not the absence of wounds, but the will to survive them, share this story. He was inside the courthouse now, if he could call the squad, adobe building with its 2 holding cells and a dusty bench of courthouse. He sat behind a desk that was scarred with knife marks and dried ink, reading over a land dispute claim that had been filed 3 months too late. His coat was still buttoned, though it was warm, and he kept his holstered pistol nearby, resting in plain sight on the edge of the desk. The air inside smelled of dried leather and stale coffee, the kind of smell that clings to a man who does not expect guests. Then, he heard the voices outside, raised, sharp. Something about letting that savage die. Another voice laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. He paused, looked up from the paper, and let the words sink in. He recognized the tone, not urgent, but dismissive, cold. He stood slowly, his right knee, stiff from a break that had never healed right, protesting, and walked to the door. He stepped out onto the porch with a slow, deliberate movement. And that's when he saw her. Put yourself in that position, a woman scorned by an entire town for a simple act of kindness. Would you have the courage to stand your ground? Comment below, and let's talk about the quiet strength of a compassionate heart. The woman was crouched beside the old stone well, one arm holding onto the rim for balance. She had no shoes, and the skin of her calves and ankles was scraped raw in places from walking the hard, unforgiving dirt. Her dress had once been cream-colored, but it was now the same brown as the road, torn at the shoulder and at the chest, where the fabric had split, exposing the full slope of her bust, which was damp with sweat and clinging to her curves in the sun. Her face was flushed, her wavy, chestnut hair half stuck to her forehead. She was holding a dented tin cup to the mouth of a collapsed man, an Apache by the look of him, his skin deeply weathered, his shoulder wrapped in a crude bandage that was stained through with blood and sand. The townsfolk were standing back, 6 of them at least, their arms crossed, their faces a mask of sneering indifference. Isaac took in the scene without blinking. The woman wasn't speaking. She was focused, steady, her hand gently tilting the cup to the man's cracked lips. He was barely responsive, his eyes half shut, muttering something too soft to hear. Isaac walked toward them, his boots a heavy, deliberate sound on the dusty ground. The townsfolk backed away a little, not out of fear, but out of a sullen, resentful discomfort. They didn't like him much. That suited him fine. "You from town?" he asked the woman when he was close enough. She looked up quickly, her expression not fearful, but weary, guarded, as if she had had to defend herself with silence more than with words. "No," she said, her voice dry, cracked, but controlled. "I was passing through. Slept in the hay shed behind the church." He studied her for another beat. Her cheeks were hollowed slightly. She hadn't eaten well. Her dress was barely holding together. Yet, she kept offering water, as if she weren't the one in need. He squatted beside the old Apache man. The man's breath was shallow, his skin hot to the touch. Fever, dehydration, a bad wound. The tunic he wore had beadwork on the collar, a warrior's mark. This man had standing in his tribe. He was not just a drifter. He was someone who mattered. The old man said something, his voice a low, ragged whisper. "I couldn't make it out," the woman offered. Might have been son or daughter. Her eyes, a clear, startling blue in her sun-darkened face, never left the man's. "You got a name?" Isaac asked her. She hesitated, then said, "Annaba." He nodded once. "Judge Isaac Thorne." He didn't offer his hand. "I know who you are," she said quietly. "You've touched him only to move him into the shade and to give him water. You've already done more than most here ever will." He turned to the townsfolk then. "Go on," he said flatly. "This ain't your business anymore." They didn't argue. They just muttered and walked away in twos and threes, kicking dust as they went. "You can't stay here," he said after a moment, more to himself than to her. "But I'm not letting him die in the road like a stray dog." He looked at her. "Can you walk?" "Yes." He knelt, slid one arm under the Apache's back, and braced his legs. Annaba grabbed the man's other arm, and together, they lifted him. He weighed next to nothing. If you think the main character made the right and brave choice, a choice to embrace a new, uncertain future, leave a heart in the comments to spread the belief in kindness and second chances. They carried him up the courthouse steps and through the door. Isaac cleared the case papers off a long bench, laid a folded wool blanket over it, and helped her ease the old man down. She stayed by his side, soaking a cloth in the bucket at the back of the room, gently cleaning the wound. She moved with the same kind of careful, practiced grace he remembered from his own wife, a memory that was a sharp, familiar ache in his chest. "You a nurse?" he asked, watching her. "No," she said. "I worked with a woman who did field tending during the war. She took me in when I had nowhere else to go. I learned what I could. She didn't volunteer any more than that." He poured a mug of water and handed it to her. She drank it slowly, her throat moving, her chest rising and falling with shallow, even breaths. Her skin had burned a little from the sun, and the freckles on her nose stood out, brighter now. He leaned against the doorframe, his eyes on the wounded man. "His kin might come," he said. "Put yourself in that position, a woman with nothing left but her pride. Would you accept a stranger's help? Comment yes or no, and tell us your reason." He figured, "You're not afraid of that." Annaba glanced at him, her eyes, a clear, startling blue, not flinching. "I was more afraid," she said, "of doing nothing." He respected that answer. They didn't speak for a long time after that. The courthouse dimmed as the sun sank lower. He lit the lamp. Outside, the town slipped into its usual evening quiet. She stayed beside the Apache, her hands folded in her lap now, waiting. Isaac stood across the room, his arms folded, watching her. Neither one of them moved to leave. By morning, the air outside the courthouse was dry and still, the sun already climbing hard over the ridge. Inside, the Apache elder had made it through the night. His breathing had steadied some. The fever hadn't broken, but he wasn't any worse. That counted for something. Annaba hadn't left his side. She had sat upright on the floor all night, her head tilted down, but never fully asleep. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair a wild, tangled mess around her face. Her dress, still torn at the neckline, clung to her chest in the places where her sweat had dried. Yet, she held herself with a quiet, unshakable dignity. Isaac had slept sitting up in his desk chair, his boots still on, his coat across his lap. He stirred first, his neck aching, his jaw locked. His eyes went immediately to the old man, and then to her. "He's still breathing," she said, without turning. He stood, his own body a symphony of aches and pains. He said something again, she said, her voice a low, rough sound. "Just before dawn." Same words. Son and daughter. But there was more this time. He said, "Life for life." Isaac stared at the old man for a long, heavy moment. Then he turned, opened the courthouse door, and stepped out into the morning. 15 minutes later, he came back with a burlap sack that held dried apples, hard bread, and a wrapped portion of smoked beef. She ate quietly, slowly, her eyes never leaving the old man's face. The silence lasted until the sun had reached the courthouse windows, and then came the horses. They heard them before they saw them. 3, maybe 4 riders, moving slow, deliberate, kicking up a cloud of dust that was a promise of a new and dangerous complication. Isaac stepped out onto the porch, his hand resting near the butt of his pistol. Annabeth stood and followed, staying close to the doorway, a silent, watchful shadow. 4 riders had stopped at the well. One had dismounted, a younger man, tall and lean, a long braid wrapped with leather bands, a knife at his hip. The other 3 stayed on horseback. One of them was a woman, her face narrow and angular, her black hair braided tight and decorated with bone and bead. The other was younger, with a rounder face and brighter eyes, her own hair loose but pulled back behind her ears. She was the one who was holding the reins of the lead horse. And on that horse sat the Apache elder, Toka, propped upright, wrapped in a fresh blanket, swaying gently, but clearly awake. His eyes opened as Isaac stepped into full view. The woman leading the horse, the younger one, brought him closer to the courthouse steps and stopped, then dismounted. She didn't speak at first. She just looked at Isaac calmly. If you believe that a home is not a place you find, but a place you build, a place where 2 broken souls can find in each other the strength to start again, then share this video. The elder lifted his chin. His voice, though cracked, was firm. She gave me water, he said, his accent thick but his words clear. He looked at Annabeth. You protected her. He looked back at Isaac. You are her man, he said. It was not a question. Isaac didn't speak. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. The older of the 2 daughters stepped forward, her English careful and precise. I am Sanaa, she said. This is my sister Leah. You gave life to our father. That life must be honored. In our way. She didn't look away. You take us, she said. We are yours. Behind them. The other Apache men said nothing. No one moved. Isaac felt Annabeth shift slightly behind him, her breath held. He looked at Sanaa directly. I didn't do anything but give him shelter, he said. That was her. The elder nodded. But she is yours. You kept her safe. That makes it you. Put yourself in that position. A man who has sworn off the world. A man who has buried his own family. How would you respond to such a shocking, life-altering proposition? Comment below, and let's talk about the impossible choices we make for the sake of honor. His jaw worked. He hadn't spoken so many words in a day in months. Now, all eyes were on him. I don't take wives for payment, he said slowly. Not for honor. Not for anything. Sanaa didn't flinch. This is not a payment, she said. This is survival. We offer ourselves freely. And if I say no? The younger one, Leah, stepped forward, her tone lighter, almost curious. Then we return. But it would be a shame to offer life and have it be rejected. Isaac stepped back slightly, motioning toward the door. Bring your father inside, he said. He's not ready to ride. The Apache men looked at each other, then nodded. The daughters helped lift the elder and carried him in with a surprising strength and ease. He moved a second bench near the first, gave him a blanket, poured him more water. Sanaa remained standing. Leah wandered the edge of the room, her eyes running along the shelves of books and stacked papers. Annabeth remained silent by the stove, watching everything. Later, when the elder had fallen into a deep, healing sleep, Isaac sat on the porch with Annabeth. They gave you to me, he said quietly. She nodded once. I know. You all right with that? Her voice was soft. You didn't claim me. You just didn't deny it, either. He looked at her. Could have said something. I didn't want to embarrass him, she said. He looked away. This place isn't safe. For Apache girls. Or for women like you. I know that too. They sat in silence again. From inside came the sound of Leah asking a question about a book, Sanaa's voice, lower, sharper, telling her to stay quiet. They'll stay a day or 2, he said, until he's stronger. She didn't answer, but she didn't leave, either. Neither did he. The quiet, solitary world of Judge Isaac Thorne had been invaded, not by an army, but by a debt of honor he had never asked for, and a family he did not know how to refuse. The morning after the elder was carried into the courthouse, Gray Ridge felt different. Nothing in the town had changed. The wind still swept through the dusty roads, and the same drunk from the saloon still passed out behind the smithy. But something about the courthouse felt heavier, fuller. 3 women now shared its space. None of them spoke much. None of them asked for anything. Yet their presence had rearranged everything. Judge Isaac Thorne woke early, as he always did. He didn't like sleeping past first light. Not since the war. And especially not with strangers under his roof, even if they weren't exactly strangers anymore. He shaved at the basin, rethreaded the chain on his pocket watch, and tightened the collar of his worn shirt. When he came out from his back room, he found Annabelle already sweeping the floor with a stiff, wiry broom. She didn't stop when she saw him. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I didn't mind," she replied, her voice low, steady. Felt like something that needed doing. If you have ever found yourself in a situation where the right thing to do was also the most complicated, the most dangerous, then you understand the crossroads at which Isaac Thorne now stood. If you believe in the quiet, unassuming power of a decent heart, leave a like on this video. Her dress was still torn, the neckline pinned as best she could with 2 small pieces of wire, but it still exposed the top of her chest, where her freckles stood out like pale dust. She hadn't found shoes yet, and her feet were red from the cold of the stone floor. Still, her posture was calm, as if she had always belonged there. In the next room, Sanaa sat on the floor beside her father, dabbing his forehead with a damp cloth. She barely glanced up when Isaac entered. Her long, dark braid lay over one shoulder, the leather ties and bone beads catching the light from the window. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes followed him, measuring. "He's stronger," she said. He nodded. "He slept through the night. He knows he's safe here." "That's not something I promised." "You didn't need to." Leia sat cross-legged near a shelf of court ledgers, flipping through pages she couldn't read but seemed to study anyway. She was barefoot, too, her tribal dress shorter than her sister's, tied at the waist with a sash of beaded cloth. She looked up at him and grinned faintly. "Put yourself in that position, a man who has sworn off the world, a man who has buried his own family. How would you respond to such a shocking, life-altering proposition? Comment below, and let's talk about the impossible choices we make for the sake of honor." That afternoon, he held court. A cattleman had accused his neighbor of stealing fence wood. The hearing was short, pointless. The courthouse only had 3 benches, and all of them were filled, some out of an interest in the case, most just to get a glimpse of the women who were now residing under the judge's roof. Annabelle sat behind the desk where she had begun stacking papers earlier. Her hands moved slow and exact, sorting claim slips and land filings into neat rows. She didn't look up once. Her torn dress hung open slightly at the shoulder, revealing more than most women in that town would have allowed, but she never adjusted it. She wasn't ashamed. He watched the faces of the men who were seated in the courtroom. Their eyes kept drifting from him to her, their expressions less than polite. He cleared his throat hard during the testimony, just enough to break their attention. When the hearing had ended, he ordered the benches cleared. Only one man lingered, Tom Ackerley, the feed store clerk, younger and slicker than most. He leaned near Annabelle, offering a smile. "If you need fabric for a proper dress, miss, I could." "She doesn't," Isaac said, without turning. The man blinked. "I only meant, I heard what you meant." Annabelle looked up briefly, her face giving nothing away, but he caught the flicker in her eyes. Not fear, disappointment, as if she had expected no better from the town. Later, as the sun bled lower behind the ridge, Sanaa appeared in the doorway of his back room, her arms folded. "My sister wants to remain," she said, without introduction. "She thinks she can learn something from the old doctor. Medicine, maybe." He looked at her. "And you?" "I will leave when our father can travel." He nodded. "I see how you look at her," Sanaa said after a moment. "The quiet one." He didn't respond. "She gave water when no one else would," she said. "That means more to us than it does to you." "She's not mine," he said evenly. "She should be," Sanaa replied, and then she left the room. He sat there for a long time after that, the silence gathering around him again, the weight of a decision he did not know how to make pressing in on him from all sides. The wind picked up again that morning, dragging grit across the wooden porch of the courthouse and rattling the shutter hinges. It was the kind of wind that felt like a warning, though no one ever said it aloud. Gray Ridge was full of silences like that. Unsaid things, quiet judgments, glances that lingered longer than they should. Judge Isaac Thorne had learned to read those silences long ago. He felt them now, heavier than ever. Inside the courthouse, Annabelle folded blankets at the edge of the bench where the elder Apache lay resting. His breathing was steadier, the swelling in his shoulder had gone down, though he still couldn't walk without help. Sanaa stayed nearby, quietly tending to him. Leia had taken to disappearing during the day, slipping out each morning with a satchel over her shoulder, her bare feet kicking up dust as she walked toward the back road that led to the retired doctor's cabin. She would come back by sundown, her arms full of leaves and dried roots, her fingers sometimes stained with dye or blood. She never explained what she was learning. She didn't have to. If you have ever felt the weight of a community's judgment, the sting of their whispers, the coldness of their stares, then you understand the courage it took for Isaac and Annabeth to stand their ground. If you believe in the power of a quiet, unassuming love to defy the world, then subscribe to Mr. Storytelling. That morning, after Leia had left, Isaac stepped out back to split wood. He needed the rhythm of the work, needed something that didn't involve watching Annabeth move quietly through the courthouse, barefoot and tired, folding linens and restacking law books without being asked. Her dress was still torn at the neckline, the safety pin still holding the left side together where the fabric gaped. He tried not to watch her, and failed most days. By midday, she brought him out a chipped tin bowl of beans and set it in front of him without a word. She sat down across the porch, her arms resting on her knees, the sun lighting her hair in patches, the breeze pulling at the hem of her dress. She stared off at the horizon, not blinking. He set his spoon down. "You've been running from something?" he asked. Her eyes moved to his, calm but firm. "Yes." "You still running?" "No," she said. "Has a small decision ever suddenly changed your whole life? If possible, tell your story in the comment section." "I was a schoolteacher once," she added suddenly. "Back in Kansas. A widow of a man I didn't love. The daughter of a man who drank himself into debt. I left when the debts came looking for me." He didn't interrupt. "I made it west with a church group. They dropped me in Bisbee. After that, I walked. Town to town. Nothing stuck. Why Gray Ridge?" She gave a small, weary shrug. "I was tired." He nodded once. "That's honest." "You?" she asked. He shifted, leaning against the porch post. "Served during the war. Lost my wife and my boy to the fever 3 years after. Came here because it was quiet and didn't ask for anything." She studied him for a moment. "And now it's asking." "No," he said. "But it's watching." He didn't say it, but they both knew what he meant. The town had noticed. That night, after the others had gone quiet, he walked to the edge of the porch, his arms folded, his coat pulled tight despite the heat that still rose from the ground. She joined him, barefoot as always, her toes curling on the wooden planks. He didn't look at her. "You all right?" She nodded. "I've lived through worse." "You shouldn't have to." "I did anyway." They stood in silence for a long, long while. Then, without looking, she touched his hand. Not much, just her fingers, placed on the side of his knuckles. He didn't move away. From inside came the soft clink of Sanaa's beadwork as she shifted in her sleep. From the town came nothing but the wind. And together, they stood there, quiet, unmoving, not claiming, not explaining, just staying. This was their point of no return. They were no longer just a judge and a stranger. They were two souls, standing watch together, in the heart of a town that was, for the first time, beginning to feel like a home. By midweek, the town had stopped whispering and had started talking louder. Judge Thorne had let it simmer. Days of half-heard remarks at the feed store, of longer stares at Annabeth when she walked alone to fetch water, of deliberate gaps left at the church service when her name came up. But on Thursday morning, something shifted. He stepped out of the courthouse just after sunrise. The sky was still orange, the town not yet fully awake. Annabeth had left earlier to bring the elders some clean cloth from the doctor's shop. Leia had gone with her. Sanaa remained inside, keeping watch, as always. But this time, when Isaac looked down the road, he saw them gathered. 7 men. 2 of their wives trailing behind. All of them locals, ranchers, shopkeepers, and the undertaker's brother, who rarely spoke, but who now stood near the front, as if he had come to see something settled. Sheriff Kincaid waited near the back, his arms crossed, his eyes scanning everyone, but not stopping anything. If you have ever felt that you were running from a past you couldn't escape, only to find a future you never expected, then you understand the fragile, beautiful hope that was beginning to bloom in that lonely Arizona courthouse. If you believe in the power of a shared, quiet strength, leave a comment below. The first to speak was Ephraim Jensen, a man in his mid-50s, with a salt and pepper beard, a man who was always in town long enough to stir up trouble, but who never stayed long enough to see it fixed. "This ain't about your right to live quiet, Judge," he said, his voice a low, challenging growl. "This is about who you're letting inside our town. They haven't broken a law," Isaac answered plainly. "They don't need to. They don't belong. Apache don't belong. And that woman, she's half-naked, unwed, and sleeping under your roof." Isaac's jaw tightened. "She's not a problem. She's a distraction," Ephraim snapped. "She's making people talk. It weakens your seat." Someone behind him muttered their agreement. "She helped to save a man's life," Isaac said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, when no one else here would. "That ain't the point." "No," he said. "It is. Put yourself in that position, a man who has sworn off the world, a man who has buried his own family. How would you respond to such a shocking, life-altering proposition? Comment below. And let's talk about the impossible choices we make for the sake of honor." He stepped closer, his boots dragging dust. "You all walked past that well and saw an old man dying, and not a one of you moved. She did. She brought him water. She brought him shelter. And you call her a whore for it. I call her the only decent soul I've seen in this place in weeks." A pause. He glanced past the men, toward the edge of town. Annabeth stood there, returning from her errand, her hands clutching a folded cloth, her dress still torn, her shoulders burned from the sun. She stopped when she saw the crowd, reading the situation instantly. But she didn't turn around. She walked forward, every step slow, measured. She didn't speak. She didn't look at anyone but him. When she reached the edge of the group, a man in the back, Tom Ackerley, the same clerk who had tried to help her before, stepped into her path. "You should be ashamed," he muttered, loud enough to be heard. Annabeth didn't reply. He looked at the crowd. "Is this what we're letting stand? Apache lovers and whores, sitting on the judge's porch like they own it." That was when Isaac moved. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for his gun. He just stepped up beside Annabeth and stared at Ackerley until the man flinched and took a single, shuffling step back. "She's not leaving," Isaac said. "And you're not speaking to her again." A stillness followed. He turned to the rest of them. "You all want a hearing? File a case. But if you think you're going to intimidate the law because it doesn't look the way you want it to, then you've got the wrong damn town." And with that, he turned his back on them. Annabeth followed without a word. Inside, Sanaa stood from the bench, her eyes locked on them both. She had heard every word. She didn't speak, but her gaze had changed. Less guarded, more certain. He sat at the edge of his desk, his breathing hard. She set the cloth down gently and stood across from him. "You didn't need to do that," she said, her voice a quiet, wondering sound. "I did," he said. "They'll hate you for it. They already do." The silence returned, but it was heavier now, more intimate. She took a step forward. "You said I could stay. I meant it." Her eyes dropped to his hand, which was resting on the desk, tensed, open. She reached out slowly and placed her own hand over his. It wasn't a gesture of comfort. It was a gesture of solidarity, of a shared, unshakable strength. He looked at her, his jaw still tight. She leaned in. No hesitation. No pause. Their lips met, soft, warm, unsure for a second, and then real, earned. It wasn't a claim. It wasn't desperation. It was staying. The first frost came before the town was ready for it. It slipped in during the night, silent and thin, laying a silver sheen over the rooftops and the window panes. The dust of the roads stiffened underfoot. Smoke rose early from every chimney in Gray Ridge, including the one above the courthouse. Inside, Isaac stood at the back wall, his sleeves rolled up, a hammer in his hand. He was framing a second partition, the wood cut from a pile out back, salvaged and rough-edged. He measured slow, steady, one nail at a time. Behind him, Annabeth was washing linens in a metal basin. Her new dress, a simple, blue cotton, still low-cut, but mended at the shoulders and the hem, clung damp against her hips as she worked. Her hands were raw from the cold water, but she didn't complain. "You don't have to do this," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "I know," he replied, driving another nail. "You're building a wall." "I'm building a room," he said. Her eyes met his. "For who?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached down, picked up a plank, and measured it against the floor. "Thought it was time you had a door to close, if you wanted one," he said. Click subscribe to not miss the next interesting stories from Mr. Storytelling channel. She didn't say anything, but her mouth softened just slightly. That morning, the elder Apache, Toka, rose from his blankets without any help. Sanaa helped him into a wrapped coat, stitched from 2 hides and patched at the elbows. He sat by the fire for nearly an hour, sipping tea while he watched the others move through the room. His gaze lingered on Annabelle longer than it had before. He nodded once, a slow, final, and profound gesture. Then he stood. Sanaa brought him his walking staff and a satchel of herbs and dried meat. Outside, 2 of his tribesmen waited on horseback, wrapped in furs, quiet and still. "I will go now," the elder said, his English sparse but clear. "My daughters choose. I accept." Isaac stepped forward. "He can stay longer, if he needs to." The elder shook his head. "He does not. He has seen." He turned to Sanaa, placing a hand on her shoulder, then to Leah, who stood near the stove, her braid tied back in a new, red ribbon Annabelle had given her 2 nights earlier. "You have your own path," he said. "Do not wait for mine. Like and share to send positive energy to those who need it." That evening, after Sanaa had left, her own path leading her north, the house was quieter, but not emptier. Leah moved with more ease now. She sat beside Annabelle at the desk in the evenings, helping her to record the names and the dates from the case files. She had begun to stitch purses in the corner, and even the sheriff had stopped by earlier that day to ask if she had anything for a toothache. He hadn't looked Isaac in the eye, but he had knocked. The townsfolk were still cold, but they were no longer circling. At sundown, Isaac finished the final beam on the small back room. The door wasn't much, 2 hinges and a latch, but it closed. He stood back, his arms folded, watching Annabelle as she stepped through the doorway and looked inside. "Yours," he said. She turned slowly. "You gave me a room." He stepped closer. "I gave you a place. I've been thinking maybe you could stay, if that's something you'd want. Longer term." She waited. He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a small square, wrapped in cloth. Inside was a ring, not polished, not store-bought. Just a simple band he had filed himself from a silver coin, its edge smooth but uneven. "I ain't good with speeches," he said, "and I don't know what church you were raised in. But if staying with me, if that's what you still want, then I'd like it to be as more than just company." She looked at the ring, then at him. "I've already said yes," she whispered. He smiled, barely, but it was real. She took the ring and slid it on, then pulled him down by the collar of his shirt and kissed him again, slower, deeper than before. They stood there in the doorway of the room he had built, him with sawdust still on his sleeves, her barefoot, with raw fingers and a mended dress, knowing that what came next wouldn't be perfect, but it would be theirs. The 2 worlds, the one of the solitary, grieving judge and the one of the hunted, desperate outcast, had not just met, they had merged. They had become one.